Hello and welcome to exercise session number 7, where we'll be talking about tuples. So first off, some practical information. We discovered two types of problems during the last 2 weeks. So first, a strange problem related to an error that mentions something called Unicode. It doesn't matter what it is. What's more important is that type of problem has been fixed. And if you encounter it again, of course, make us aware of it. The second problem is that some of you encounter slow test or test that wouldn't appear in the test runner, and the cause of the problem that we were aware of here has also been fixed. So the test system should be more robust also during the exercise sessions. Finally, we are still getting occasional support emails with people who have problems generating token files and so on. Usually these support emails arrive after the deadline, which is really unfortunate because as far as I know, we can fix all problems that anyone has with the system fairly quickly on for instance Discord. So if you have problems with the system still, please don't hesitate to contact us. We will be able to fix it quickly, and then it won't be a problem for you anymore. It's not something where you're supposed to spend a long time trying to fix your problems. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's take a look at the exercise session. So that means that I need to find it, and I wonder if I have it here somewhere. 2 seconds. Here we go. Okay. So here's the exercise. So the first one is a warm-up exercise. So today's topic, tuples, is I think one of the hardest things about today's topic will actually be that to many of you it's going to look like we are teaching you about lists anew, and we're just calling them tuples instead of lists. And that's kind of true. Tuples and lists are almost identical in terms of what they can do. Tuples has some slightly different notation, and then it's not possible to change a tuple once it has been created. And that makes it even more mysterious, because why would you have a list that you cannot change? Why not just have a list and not change it? But for sort of technical reasons, they occupy really important space in Python, and that's why we have them. And we'll look at that a bit later, I think. So if you just accept for now that we kind of need tuples, let's try to look at some of the things we can do with them. So I have the VS Code here, and I think I'm just going to launch Python so I can try to look at these problems. So the first one is we need to create an empty tuple and a tuple with one item. So we can create an empty tuple in 2 ways. So let's say T1 is our first empty tuple, and we can create it by just calling the tuple function. That's actually going to create an empty tuple that is printed like this. Another way you can create an empty tuple is actually using this notation. This notation, sorry. This will also create an empty tuple. So now it's an empty tuple as well. So a tuple with one element, we can create that in this way, for instance. Let's call it T2. And the element can be anything. So in this case, it'll be hello world. And then in order to turn this into a tuple, right now it wouldn't be a tuple, it would just be a string. We can actually just confirm that. So we can see it's a string. But in order to turn it into a tuple, we add a comma afterwards. And then T2 is a tuple. And actually, and this is maybe something that looks a little bit mysterious, but the parentheses are optional when we define tuples. So if I do this, let's call this one for T3, you can see that T3 is also a tuple, and in fact T3 is identical to T2. So keep that in mind for now, that we can define tuples using commas and parentheses, or just using commas, and Python will automatically start interpreting it as a tuple. Okay, so that was the first one. Check if 2 tuples have the same length. Okay, So as I mentioned earlier, tuples are almost identical to lists. So here I can create a tuple, and I'm using the parentheses notation with 2 elements. And here I can create another tuple with 2 elements as well. Let's say it's a 2 and the string hello world. And then I can check if they're the same length by just calling the length function on the tuple like this. And I'm adding just a little bit of space, and it's purely for cosmetic reasons. Like this. Oops. Oh yeah, that's because I did a single equality. So now I'm checking for equality. So we can see that in this case they both have length 2. But if I add one element here, they no longer have the same length. Use tuple assignment to swap the values of 2 variables. So this is it's not just using tuple assignment, it's also using something called tuple unpacking. So okay, so what does that mean? Let's say that I define a tuple and I'm going to call it t, and I can define it using parentheses. So let's say t is 2, 5. So now we can see that t is a tuple. Then if I use this notation, a, b equal to t, what's going to happen is that it's going to notice here on the left hand side that this is actually a tuple with the elements a and b, and these should be assigned to the value in the tuple t, which also has 2 elements. In other words, a will be assigned to 2 and b will be assigned to 5. So we can check that and see that it's indeed the case. And this is where the note I made before, that we can define tuples with parentheses or without parentheses, is actually convenient to remember, because you can ask yourself, what would this do? And the answer is that it would do exactly the same thing as before, because the 2 lines are in fact equivalent. Since I have a comma here, Python understands that I'm defining a tuple in this case and in this case. The parentheses are simply purely for visual purposes. Some will prefer to have the parentheses here, and some might prefer not to have the parentheses. And I can even put these ideas together and define the 2 variables in one go like this, and that's actually going to work. Okay, so I think the question was about swapping 2 variables. So how can I do that? Well, I could put b and a here on the right hand side. And now a is 2 and b is 5, and that means that when Python encounters this expression, it's going to assign a to b, and at the same time it's going to assign b to a. So a and b will be swapped in this case. So now we got that a is 5 and b is suddenly equal to 2. So this is how we can swap the value of 2 variables in a single line, which is, I don't know, I guess that it's not really useful. I don't know. But the general idea that we can assign 2 variables at once using tuples, that is on the other hand very convenient to remember, because there's actually a couple of important places Python uses that, including functions with multiple return values that we might see today, or maybe we won't see today. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Try to change the value of a, wait a second. Yeah, try to change the value in a tuple. What happens? Well, I'll spoil it a bit. Nothing good is going to happen. So let's define a tuple, and in this case I'm just going to define one with 3 numbers in it. And now let's try to change the value. Yeah, first of all, let's try to get a value. So we can index the tuple exactly like it was a list to get all the different elements. And we can even get the last element using negative indexing, and slicing works, and all the stuff that we expect would work for a list will also work for a tuple. Except we cannot change the tuple. If I go in and say that element number 1 should be equal to 99, I get this error. And this is because Python is trying to tell me that the tuple does not support item assignment. This is called item assignment. If on the other hand, if I defined a variable, let's call it L for list, and this was a list, so it was 1 to 4 again, of course I could change the value of the list like this, and it would work as I expect. So keep that in mind, we're not allowed to change the tuple. Back. Try adding a value to a tuple, what happens? But that depends a little on what we mean by adding. But if we mean by adding that we change the tuple, so for the list what we have is an append function. So we can append, like let's say we append -1 to this list, then it changes the list. We cannot do that for the tuple. Okay, I take my tuple, so remember that T is my tuple, and now I append -1 to the tuple. That doesn't work. But what I can do is that I can add two tuples together using the plus operator. So if I take T and then I define a singleton tuple just containing the number -1, then I can add them together and that'll result in this. But the important point to remember here is that this is not like changing T. This is defining a new tuple with a single extra element. So you can see that T remains unchanged, of course. So this is how you would add a number to a tuple, if that is at least what is intended to be asked in the problem. I think it is. Okay, so let me just end with the last reason why we might want to have tuples instead of just having lists. And that actually has to do with dictionaries. So I just think it's convenient to say, because otherwise tuples are going to seem really strange. So if I define a dictionary, I can, like, let's say that 3 is a key and the resulting value is the number 3, like this. And now I have a dictionary. So I can call that dictionary store that in the variable D, and then I can index D with 3. Something that I cannot do is that I can index a dictionary with a list. So if I try to do something like this, I get an error. And this error is trying to tell me that the key here is of type list. This is not something that works as a key because it's not what's called hashable. What that means is what in the book will call mutability and immutability. It means that it basically means that I can change this list. Since I can change the list, it could put the dictionary in an undefined state if I subsequently somehow went in and affected this and changed that list by maybe changing the number 3 to something else. But what I can do is that I can use a tuple instead. And that's simply because the tuple is not mutable. It's not possible to change the tuple. So this is allowed. And this is one of the big reasons why we need to have tuples in the Python programming language, because being able to index dictionaries with sequential types it's convenient in a number of instances. And there are other places in the programming language where it's just really convenient to have something that behaves like a list, but you know for certainty that nobody will be able to change it somewhere else in the code. And of course now I can index my dictionary using tuples like this. And just a final reminder, actually this will work as well, because as I said before, this is actually interpreted as a tuple. It's simply identical to a tuple. I think something bad happened to my screen recording, so I think I'll stop here and hopefully the screen recording is okay.